Okay, we'll make a start. So first things first, people at the back, can you hear me loud and clear? Microphone people, are you happy with that? Okay, good stuff. So thanks for coming along to this session titled Developing and Maintaining a Custom Course Marketing System. So this is about the qualifax.ie website that we built. It's about a year ago since it went live. Basically, it's a massive marketing system with 1,000 different providers of third level courses. We're going to talk through how we used Drupal's standard editorial flows, how we extended them, and why we think this was a good idea. We'll also talk about the custom work that we did. Oh, never started my timer. We'll talk about the custom work that we did where the standard Drupal tooling wasn't sufficient. And we'll talk about some of the, I suppose, hidden bonuses that we got from sticking with Drupal's standard APIs when we developed the site. So some quick introductions. My name is Alan Burke. English is my first language and I speak quite quickly. If at any point I'm going too fast, feel free to raise your hand and tell me to slow down. There will be no problem, but I'm going to do my best to keep this relatively slowly paced. Now, in terms, let's see, I work for Anartech. So we're a proud sponsor of DrupalCon and partners of the Drupal Association. I've been working with Anartech for 14 years now. I'm one of the directors and a technical director on projects within Anartech. So we're currently hiring people for projects. Come down and talk to us at our booth if you're interested. There are a few people from Anartech here in the room. You can raise your hands and make some noise. And some of these people were involved in the project as well. So that's it. So in terms of the work we do, this is a fairly typical Anartech project. It's on the face of it just another website, but once you look under the hood, there's something complex and complicated going on, and integrations with third-party systems or very funky editorial controls or stuff like that. That's the kind of work that we excel in, and we're proud to be working with Qualifax, and we've a number of high-profile clients around Ireland. So that is Anartech. Now, I'm going to give a quick introduction to Qualifax. So Qualifax, as an organization, are responsible for helping people who are interested in further education in Ireland. So as with any country, there are quite a few different third-level providers across the country. In fact, there's almost 1,000. And Qualifax are responsible for having a central system where all that information is centrally maintained and easily searchable. So the Qualifax organization have their own editorial team who work with all of these different entities independently, and they supply the information to Qualifax in various different ways. So in some cases, they get they'll have a API access or they'll have back-end access to the third-level provider. And that's fine for some of the bigger third-level providers like universities and things like that. But as you go down the scale, there are much smaller niche third-level providers, and the information might be distributed to Qualifax as an email, or I suspect possibly as a post-it in some cases, judging by the amount of information they have on the courses on this website. So that leads to challenges in terms of how we work or how they work with their content. They don't have the option of delegating editorial control to the actual source of the information. And we'll talk about future plans on how that might change, but that's not how things currently go. So what I want to do now is risk the live demo. So we'll see how this goes. And so hopefully, no, didn't work. Let's try it again. Okay, I'm not going to give up. Okay, let's see, is this going to work? No, it's not. It's not going to work. Is it working? It does. It works. Good stuff. Thanks very much. So basically, this is a local instance of the website, and it's at one level, it's actually a relatively simple website. It's just 15,000 nodes with lots of information about courses. So as a student, you can come along and search for things. And all this works on my local instance. And you can see all the details of the different courses you've searched for. You can drill down by the type of course. So higher education courses would be the most common third level course type within Ireland. So when we worked on this website, we would have spent time working on the user experience and what users needed to do and how users needed to search, and eventually came up with this user interface. We're not going to talk too much about the front end today, but it's there. It works pretty well. There's a lot of useful tools across the website for end users, like they can export the list of courses they've searched for. They can save courses to a little short list. There's actually a number of different end users for this website. So at one level, we only initially thought this was only going to be a course that served students who were leaving school and they needed to find out about third level courses. But the reality is this also has to serve parents, and actually one of the key audiences for this website are guidance counsellors, so staff within schools who help students find their third level sector, find the right third level course. So quite a few of the features here and the search functionality is driven by their requirements, because while they might not be the largest users by number, they're certainly the most vocal in terms of communicating with our client. And as you might imagine, this made its way to us as well. So that's the front end of the website. So hopefully I can go back to the presentation. And how are we doing? No, still not going to work. Let's see how we get on. Okay, so we've done our quick introduction to Qualifax, and move along my notes, make sure I've got stuff covered. And we'll talk about the standard editorial flow. So this is Drupal's admin/content/node page, where you list all of the nodes on your website. So if you're a Drupal developer or user, you're probably fairly familiar with this listing, and either you love it or you've just learned to love it from all the Drupal projects you've worked on over the years. When this was presented to the client initially, at some point, there was certainly an underwhelming response. It did not serve their needs in any way, shape or form. And as part of the user research flow, we would have done a certain amount of time worrying about the editorial requirements, more in terms of workflow, which we'll talk about later on. But we certainly never thought about this in terms of, how is this going to serve our editors' needs? Now, for some context, when we started off the project, it was considered that everything would need to be very custom for this project, that just using a CMS out of the box was never going to have the requirements needed to meet have the functionality available to meet the client's requirements. So everything would have to be built custom. This was almost a fait accompli at the start of the project. However, as with every project, we knew that wasn't the most viable approach in a long-term basis. So we could have built something custom using Drupal's APIs or standard PHP, and it would have met the actual editorial requirements. However, in the long run, that's going to lead to a lot more custom code, and more custom code means more maintenance, and more maintenance means more cost in the long run. So what we decided to do was we would stick with our tried and trusted node, or a content type, and that would be used to store the data on the courses. Now, nodes aren't perfect. They certainly come with overhead in terms of performance and scalability, but nodes are very useful in that once you have your site built using a node as your central building block, it opens up a world of possibilities in terms of extensions throughout the site. So if we had chosen to go with something custom, we couldn't have used the JSON API functionality out of the box. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but that was a very, very sound validation of our approach, because what was seen as a very complex custom requirement, we were able to develop something really, really strong by just using some out-of-the-box Drupal functionality. So that's the standard editorial flow, and I'm not going to swap back and forth like I'd planned. I might just go for one swap to do a demo of the back end later on. But I want to talk about change and how hard change is. So when we worked with this client initially, they had preconceptions as to how their course management system should work. And one of the key ones, and it's a problem or a perception that remains to this day, is they had in their heads, their old system had a back end and a front end. And as far as they're concerned, never the twain shall meet. So the way Drupal works, that you have an edit tab that's there visible on the front end as an editor, this was not the way they had ever intended working, and it wasn't a change that they intended to make. So when it came to developing their editorial flow, it's all done through the admin interface. They very rarely look at the front end to see how they might get in, and if they're on a course and they might spot a typo, for example, the idea that they might click the edit screen and make the change, that is just not part of their flow at all. Everything is done through the back end. To this day, if there's a problem or an issue, or to hell, maybe some praise for some aspect of the website, they will still refer to the front end of the website and the front end website and the back end website as if they're two completely separate things. And this leads to some entertaining discussions with our support team. In any case, we felt we could do a little bit better with our old system. It was very forms driven. For every action you wanted to do on a set of content, you had to go through a couple of multi-step forms, get your set of results, act on those set of results, and if you wanted to continue, you had to start at the scratch and make a new search again. So as part of the front end, and we saw this briefly on the front end demos, we've added a faceting system. So when it comes to searching for the front end users, it's very easy to get down to the course that you're looking for. Now, you do need to know what you're looking for to a certain degree, as in the type of course you want, and you might know who the course providers are. But you can use the different facets to drill down and get at the course that you require. So when we spoke to the client initially, we're like, well, we already have a really, really good system to get at the courses you want, so that you can make the changes that you want to make. But again, this wasn't something they were used to. They had a preconceived notion as to how they would go editing their system, so this wasn't going to work. So we had to come back to our standard node editing listings that we've shown already, and we had to add faceting to it. So we have, in this case here, we've taken their existing system and essentially transformed it into a Drupal form. So all this is, in many ways, is a search API backed view with a faceting system put on top. And this meta requirement, they now have a way to get down to the list of the courses they work with very quickly by just using the faceting system. Now, the thing that we had to spend a bit of time validating and proving the use of was the actual facets you see there on the listing. So initially, when we presented this form, the request, maybe not requirement, the request was, well, where's the drop down that shows us 1,000 vendors, and we can scroll down to find the one that we were looking for, because that's how things always used to be done. So we was like, no, this is a lot easier. You just type in a couple of letters and you'll get a short list of what you're looking for. So back to the original topic on the last slide, is this change is hard, and this, for us, we thought, oh, this is a much, much better system. Even though we might think it's better, it's not what the client had expected and was used to, and this was something that took a lot of time for them to see the benefits of. But we stumbled across something very useful, and you can see with faceting, we get a count for every facet that we're currently drilling down by. And it turned out that that was the functionality that sold this feature for them, because in many cases, they don't need to get in and edit a list of courses. They need to see how many courses meet a certain set of criteria. So by using the faceting system, they can very quickly get a count of what courses meet the criteria without ever having to actually click search. So they were getting results before they ever clicked search as well. So see. So the other thing that faceting offers is the ability to facet and then remove a facet or unfacet. And again, this wasn't something possible in the old system. You might have searched with 5 or 6 different criteria, hit search, and then you just had to search again. By having a faceting system like this, we could undo a particular search or just one aspect of the search and redo the search again. So the Search API, and again, to validate the fact that we use nodes, the Search API system worked largely out of the box. We've got a couple of patches that we had to use and 1 or 2 we had to write, but largely speaking, the Search API and the faceting system worked out of the box. So again, when we're looking at long-term maintenance of the site, this is not anything custom. We've done other projects with very, very custom search, and I'll be speaking about one of those tomorrow. But this is not that. This is out of the box Drupal functionality largely. So here, let's talk about editorial flow. So yeah, editorial flow. When I've been building Drupal websites for a long time now, and I understand the difference between published and unpublished. And I'm just about getting my head around draft and revisions. So that's how I perceive content to be managed. That's just baked into my head. That's how content should be managed. So just published or unpublished. And like I said, I've got my head around drafts. But archived is slightly different. You know, and the client in their previous system had the concept of something that's archived. Drupal out of the box will show you something that's published or unpublished, but you don't necessarily know immediately that this was once published and now is no longer published. And another concept that might seem obvious to us as Drupal developers is the concept of something that's live. Well, that's just the published node. Well, in the Qualifax world, no. Live is something slightly different. Live is something that might be archived, but it's still live. So there was a lot of discussion with the client, and then we came across this lovely phrase called the holding area. And the holding area, it turns out, was crucial to how the client managed content. The holding area was the flow that was in use on the current system. And you know, we spent a long time trying to get our heads around what the holding area was and why they needed it. But it turns out that the old system would literally take a snapshot of a subset of courses, move them into a holding area, possibly a different section of the database. In some ways, it doesn't matter. But they could work on this set of courses, and then at a certain point of time, moved courses from the holding area to the live website. And we honestly didn't spend enough time trying to understand this requirement when we were doing the project. And we would have developed certain parts of the functionality we're going to show, and we had to come back and tweak it so that every part of their functionality that they previously had was captured by what we've done in Drupal. In the end, we were lucky. We weren't lucky. We worked it out. We worked out that we needed a number of different workflow states to manage the content that they have. So content can exist in any of these, and we were pretty happy that we got it down to 5 because this list was longer at one point, and with a bit of work, we managed to get it down to a shorter list. And at any one point in time, content can exist in any of these states. And these states will apply to the revisions of the content, as well as applying to the published version as well. So you might have something it's live, it's available to the public, but the next version will be a draft and it's ready to archive. So the course will be removed from the website, removed from public view. So if we go back again to the client's requirements, third level providers tend to want their courses to change once throughout the year. So they'll publish a prospectus of all the courses that are happening, and all of those courses should have their changes made at the same time, or they should be added or removed at the same time. So the idea that they might take a prospectus and, you know, slowly roll out those changes on the website over a short period of time, that wasn't sufficient at all, had to happen at a very particular point in time. So we worked with these different workflow states to get client functionality to match the old system. So basically, work comes in, a brand new course will be draft, and eventually once they're happy with it, it'll be ready to publish. And then we've got some batch processing that will publish a set of content all live at the same time. And similarly, with when they want to take a course offline or make some changes to it, they need to be able to do that and take it offline at a very particular point in time. It can't be just take off a course here and there. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm going to do the demo once, so we'll just keep going through the slides before I go back to the demo. Okay, so let's look at the draft view. So this is our standard Drupal node. It's relatively basic. We've got some field sets to give all the content that they will have. There's strong use of conditional fields. So again, this is something that we knew was the right thing to do, but was a particular challenge. In their old system, there was, I think, 2, if not 3 different types of courses, and they never overlapped. So it was one type of course and another type of course, and that was how the old system worked. We knew that by using dependent fields, we could show and hide fields based on certain criteria, and that meant we could significantly reduce the amount of custom fields within the system. So their old system had a set of custom fields that were shared across content types in essence, but they weren't the exact same set of custom fields. So when we look at some functionality like bulk update, which we'll see in a few minutes, they would have to know which custom field they were trying to update depending on the type of course that it had. So then the next piece of functionality, once you've got a draft view, draft edit, is the concept of releasing drafts. So this is where this is something we failed at. So in that the form you see here is that type of old form I talked about, where we have all of the different, I guess these are taxonomy fields or node reference fields in the case of Drupal, I guess. We wanted to have this be a faceted system, but again, it's back to change is hard. This, no matter what we did, we couldn't sell that as an approach, so we had to come back to build this custom listing. And so this was something that we weren't overly happy with, but it's a lot of these things are give and take in terms of requirements. This was obviously easy to implement. It wasn't a particularly challenging thing, but it feels very ungainly compared to the faceting system that we had in place and do have in place across the rest of the site. So what happens here is the client can go in and find a subset of courses that are ready to publish, and they can publish them all in batch. Again, we were able to use a certain amount of Drupal contrib functionality to achieve this. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel entirely here. We used views bulk operations to drive this functionality. And again, we're looking at long-term maintenance that kept that down. So if we look at the draft view, so this is something we had to build that was fully custom. Drupal has the concept of revisions and it has the concept of diffs, but it didn't seem to have any way to show you a tabular view of a node side by side between the live revision and the latest revision. So we had a good long look around, and no matter what we did, we couldn't come up with something that was close enough to the existing system to meet the client's requirements. So ultimately, this is what they had, and this is what they got again. So they need to be able to look, when they're working on an edit, to be able to see the 2 sets of data side by side in that order, look them up and down and eyeball them and decide, yeah, we've done the right thing here, where this will be ready to go, or we need to make a subsequent edit. Let's see, anything to add on that? No. So what we'll do then is we'll have a look at the concept of a hotfix. So this is a new functionality that we had to add that is not replicating precisely what the current system does. So I talked earlier on about the concept of a holding area. So the holding area content is over here and it's getting ready for the next version, but the rest of the website is still live. So the client was able to go in and just make edits as they went along, and it never affected the stuff that was in the holding area. Essentially, you had 2 drafts running side by side, each in their own pattern, each in their own history. But that's not quite how Drupal's revisions work. So what we had to do here was come up with this concept of a hotfix, where we take the current published version of a node and present it in a form. When we save this form, we actually have to create a new revision and skip the revision that's in draft. So this was definitely some custom functionality to achieve this. And this was a very tricky part of the project, where when I talked about the holding area and the different workflow states, we really should have spent even longer trying to work out exactly what was needed to be done. We missed this one. So we had to come up with a workaround. So luckily the client were happy with this in terms of it's not quite how they used to do things, but it's something that still achieves the exact same functionality that they had in place. There's some other little interesting tools that we spotted when we were building the old website, but didn't really know what they did. So these little buttons at the bottom of a standard text area, and we just assumed naively perhaps that these were there to handle a previous poor migration or something like that. But it turns out that the reason this is there is that when the client gets in the details, oftentimes they're copying, pasting from a PDF that was never in any kind of structured format. So they would have like caps in the wrong places, or they would be all caps. It would have a lot of line breaks they didn't need and things like that. So the client is literally copying, pasting from this PDF into a text field, and they don't need any fancy WYSIWYG at all. They want it to be plain text. However, they need this little bit of custom JavaScript functionality to tidy up the content that they get. So, again, it was only by the client sort of taking us aside, showing us why they do this, how it works in the old system, that we had to go, well, actually, yeah, that's absolutely crucial. That's a core part of your system. If you were to manually go in and make these changes every time, they would take them hours and hours. So, yeah, that was something a little bit interesting, a little bit different. Not something I think we've reproduced on any other website since. Okay, bulk editing. So Drupal does have the concept of editing fields in bulk, but nothing quite like this. All of the content providers, they really should share content between some of their nodes, but it isn't really feasible in terms of how they do things, because the same data is presented ever so slightly different on different courses between the different faculties. But at the same time, there is often a requirement to be able to take a batch of courses and make one change to one field across multiple courses. So, I mean, we knew about this requirement at the start. That wasn't really a problem. We couldn't quite get Drupal to do this out of the box, so we had to use some custom functionality to get this bulk edit going. So I'm going to switch over to the demo. Will I chance it now? I will chance it now. Okay, so let's see. Do a prayer to the demo gods. Okay. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so we're just going to do a couple of little demos of the work that we showed in the screenshots. So when we're in here and we want to filter down, we can use the faceting functionality to... Ooh, come on, network connection, stay stable. No. Okay, not to worry. No. Okay, plan B. Okay, so I'm going to show you the difference between certain types of courses. So this is a course that is published and doesn't have any draft version in action. So the list of tabs for editing is standard, I guess. But as soon as that becomes a course with a revision in flow, we add extra fields here, or extra tabs here. So we can see with the screenshot I showed of you between published and draft. That's a custom callback. We've relabeled the buttons here so that it's clear which version the client can edit. They can edit the published version directly. That's the hotfix screen we showed earlier on. Or we can go ahead and just make a new draft of this piece of content. Yeah. Now, the reality is, I don't think the client uses this very much because they never look at the front end at all when they're editing content. They're always looking at content directly from, say, a listing page here and going straight through to the edit tab. Or they've got some options down here as well, I think. Yeah. So we'll see if that works. The internet has given up. Well, okay. Not to worry. So here is the edit, compare published to draft. And we can see that it goes all the way down to, it's quite structured in terms of fields. I think there's about 60 fields on the different course content types. And everything is presented here so they can do a glance back and forth to see the differences between the two different versions and decide whether something is ready to go live or not. Okay, so the bulk update. Okay, so I want to be careful here because I have this in place. So with the bulk update, once they've gone through the form we saw earlier on, the form that was a little bit old and clunky with long drop downs and things like that, we get a list of all of the fields and the different values within the fields, the count of the different fields, and then we can get through to see a list of those courses. And then we can make these changes and bulk update a batch of courses at the same time. So again, this is something that it's quite custom in terms of the functionality, but it was definitely made simpler by the fact that we, back to some earlier decisions, the fact that we stuck with the Node, we were able to use the Node API and some entity query to make a lot of this work simpler to develop while it's still custom functionality. And lastly, this is sort of the batch release. So we can drill down here and find a set of courses. So what we have here is a set of courses all for this particular third level provider. And then we can choose to release them all. So they're all going to go from a current draft version to the published version in one go. Or like any views bulk operations field, we can choose to just make this action happen to just a small subset of those courses. So again, actually, we were able to use some views bulk operation functionality here and just wrote a custom plugin for that. So again, leveraging Drupal as much as possible where practical. Okay, how am I doing for time?
2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Right. We have one more thing to talk about. And bulk edit, okay. JSON API. So this was probably one of my favorite parts of this project. At the very start, we knew that there was a requirement for a bulk export of the courses from the existing site. Now, Sean, the project manager, is there, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in the old system, the editors had to go to someone in IT and say, hey, this provider would like a bulk export of their courses. And eventually someone from IT would generate that bulk update and they'd make available to someone, to the client. The client would then, the editor would say, okay, great, I'll take that bulk update and I'll transfer it over to the third-party provider who wants that bulk update. So oftentimes, getting a bulk update, of course, would take about a week. And sometimes they do it quicker, but sometimes it could take that long. So luckily, because we had used Drupal's nodes, and I know this will work with other custom entities as well, but it's pretty much out of the box with nodes. We have the JSON API, and in particular, we have, I think it's JSON API overrides. Oh, what's the name of the module? It doesn't matter. We had some one contrib module out of the box. Let us tweak everything, JSON resource overrides, that's it. It lets us tweak exactly what we exported for all of the different providers and makes that available out of the box. And hey presto, the client has an API. So we were very bullish on this and we were like, this is going to be so useful. You'll be able to, if anybody comes to you and is looking for a bulk export, it will not require custom development. You'll just be able to point them at this API and it'll make life a lot easier for your IT team. You won't have, there was about 3 different custom exports and maybe one that was dormant, but they expected it to come back in terms of a requirement. But so that's already in place and it works really well. And I'm even more delighted about it because on a separate project they were working on, the client came back and said, hey, we hear that Qualifax is an API and we'd like to use it. So we're like, well, that's great. We know all about that API. So it has come full circle on a separate client's project. We're able to use this API to pull in the content that we need. Future plans. So once we stop all the nasty bots hitting the website, and there's lots of nasty bots hitting various parts of this website that we were working on last week, but we've told them to go away nicely. One of the things we really wanted to do from the very start was find a way to reduce the overhead on the editors in terms of how they pull the content in. Now, we haven't got there yet, but that's something I think that we've put in the foundations in play to let them deal directly with some of the third-party vendors and get some of the data in directly. They can still modify it and tweak it using the flows we have in place, but an awful lot of the manual copy and paste that's happening, it really shouldn't be. We should find a way to avoid that. So, like I said, we've got other priorities that we got to sort out first, but that's certainly something that's on our agenda. Now, some mandatory slides. There you go, mandatory slides. And one more mandatory slide. So, the organizers would like you to review all of the sessions and give feedback. So use the QR code there or use the app to give some feedback on the session. Now, I probably should have said this at the very start, But if you have any questions, you can use the conference app to submit questions. Do we have any?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's plan B. Plan B is we're actually at a real conference with real people. So if people have any questions at all or comments, feel free to go to the microphone there and ask some questions. Or, like I said, use the app as well to submit some questions.
Thanks for the presentation. So working with revisions often to me feels like working in a kind of a inverted universe of Drupal. And I'm curious if you have any experiences or tips when trying to make revisions do things it doesn't want to do. Like concepts around having major or minor revisions, or comparing different states of revisions and, you know, trying to view the change over time between multiple revisions, or just any tips from, making revisions behave a bit more nicely.
We didn't have any requirement to do the major and minor revision, and that would be very useful. We bypassed that because the old system, you could just edit the draft or edit the public version, and you didn't keep a record of those individual changes. They lived in two separate worlds. So that was fine. Where we had significant difficulty was convincing Drupal that we really didn't want to edit the latest revision. We wanted to edit a previous revision, which was the published revision. So that took a good bit of work. And in the end, what you see is that callback for edit, the hotfix callback. That's essentially a custom callback that uses the form API to build a form and the Node API to get the revision. And then when we save that, we essentially save it as a revision and then reorder the revisions table so that we have the right version in the right place, or the right revision in the right place. It took a bit of wrangling, but everything else worked quite well in terms of like getting the custom. It's not a diff; it's the opposite of diff. It's everything. Getting that out and showing that was relatively straightforward. The only difficulty there was the table needed to be presented in a particular order. It took a bit of time to just get that just right, because it didn't necessarily match what's there on, say, the Node edit screen or the display screen for the end user. It's a custom ordering, so we had to do a bit of work on that. That's all I've got on that one, I'm afraid. If there's any other questions at the mic? Oh, we have a mic here.
I didn't think I was going to be next. The custom, the holding area, and then the bulk publish. Are there any plans to kind of make that code available for others to steal with pride? Yeah,
so I'd have to check, but there's not a whole pile of custom stuff in that. Really? Oh, sorry, which one? The holding area. The holding area stuff, that's pretty much out of the box.
Is it?
Yeah, that's views with, filtered views, and then we're doing a bulk action on that. The only bit that might be custom is we had to write a small views bulk operations plugin to do that. And in terms of code, that would be relatively small. So again, like the difficulty here wasn't the actual final implementation. It was like, okay, what does this really need to do? When do you really need to do this? And there was a lot more work on that. In terms of the bulk edit, there's nothing particularly secret there in terms of what the client requirements are. How it would be made generic would be the tricky thing. It's relatively tied to this course structure, let's say. But yeah, I'd happily give you a look at the back end and see if there's something that's interesting there as well. There's no problem there. But again, like there's nothing particularly I guess back to my main point is these are all little add-ons in little places. There's no big thing that we had to create. Most of the functionality by just using nodes, search API, and the other things, which are small little plugins, everything seemed to work more or less out of the box. With the code, the custom code is quite small. It's just little spots here and there. And again, that's the whole objective. We want to keep maintenance costs down in the long run. And when it comes to upgrading to the next version of Drupal, we don't have huge swathes of custom code that we need to port. It's relatively lightweight in that sense. Obviously, we're relying on the various modules being updated, but I think we're in a good space there. They're fairly well-used modules.
Thanks.
We have another question.
Oh.
Florian wants to know what system is used in the back end for the search.
Solar. So this is running on platform.sh, and we're using Solar for the back end on the search, and it works really well. And worked, I won't say completely out of the box in one go, but it didn't take an awful lot of wrangling to get right.
Thanks. Just a small question. Did you look into having visual indication of differences on the revision page, like in red and green differences, like the diff module does, but better?
I mean, we started with the diff module, and it's not that the diff module is bad. It does a really good job. But like I said, and it took us a while to understand this, they really should just stood up and said, we don't want a diff. We want to see everything together. It's the opposite of a diff. So the diff module itself, it's probably there under the hood, and because it's useful for us as developers in certain points to go, well, why are these two things different? But from an editorial perspective, it's not what was used. And again, this is back to the change is hard. We did introduce a lot of change as to how they do things, but we didn't change everything, because trying to change everything in terms of how it's done would have been too much, and we would have had a mutiny from the content editors. And it's fair, because they do a hell of a lot of work, and this is the tool they use all day, every day. So when you make even the smallest change, that's a big hurdle for them to overcome. So I guess we kept it to a minimum. Where practical, we kept things the same, and where practical, we made a change.
On the side-by-side thing, and linking Robert's question as well, is that something that you would open source or would need to open source? Or 'cause it's quite useful, actually, and you're right, nothing else kind of does that.
Yeah, so I guess we could. The bit I'd have to try and think my head around is how we'd make it more generic. But in principle, yeah, there'd be no problem there. It's not the kind of thing that would say be any kind of secret sauce for the client or anything like that. But like a lot of things, it's how would you make it generic? I guess you could just spit all the fields out in terms of the order on the edit form or something like that, or how they're listed on the structured field. Yeah, we could look into that. Okay, I'm going to be here for a few minutes. I'll be down at Anertech's stand if anyone wants to catch up and ask any further questions. Thank you very much for your time.